Hello and welcome, fellow wasteland survivors. Thanks for coming and hanging out with me today. I really do appreciate it, because in today's video we're going to be wiring our makeshift factory that we built in the last video. Now, if you haven't seen that video on these manufacturing objects, you may want to consider going and checking it out. It will better help you understand the more complex tips and tricks that we used in creating this factory. Also, how these systems work, where they go, and what they're used for. Because this build is intimidating, the way it looks. But trust me, it's not. By the end of this video, we'll have this puppy purring like a kitten. Puppy? Kitten? Oh, Bones, just get the video started. Alright, welcome back everybody. I'm Dean, and what better place to get started than right at the beginning of our factory. This is where we put our junk in. The vacuum hopper sucks it all out and sends it into our factory. So let's see how much of this part of the system is working. Now, everything that's connected to that vacuum hopper will be on and powered. All of these separators are powered up, as well as the conveyor storages. Now, there are two more parts to this particular system, and they are not powered up because they're not connected together, so we need to wire them. We'll take these three bottom sorters, connect it to the middle conveyor belt. Now we need to connect it to the top sorters, and I'll do it using the wire glitch. It makes it a lot easier to get these wires connected in places they normally will not go. Okay, now, are these systems working with it? Yes, the middle conveyor belt's working, looks good, as well as our sorters are working. And of course, all of these conveyor storages that are connected to them are working as well. So now we've got our first system completely wired up already. Alright, the next thing we're going to work on is more of a personal preference thing. This actually has nothing to do with the operations of our factory. What we're doing is we're using some of these conduit pipings and lighting from that section, and we're going to connect it to our separators. And there's a couple of reasons why I'm doing this. First of all, we're at Spectacle Island, and I have built a lot of crap here. Second of all, we are quite far away in our control booth or control center. So because of those two reasons, it's going to be pretty hard to see the animations of our objects when they're powered on. Now, what I mean by animations is pretty much the belt movement or the turning of the belt. And by doing this, when we turn on a system, we're going to be able to see that that system's on because those lights light up. Okay, next thing, we need to get our 6 vacuum hoppers powered up. And if you remember right from the last video, we've got 3 on the bottom floor, 3 on the top floor. And they are connected to our conveyor storages, which is holding all the objects that our sorters separated. Okay, so what we're going to need to do is run 6 individual power sources to this location. By doing this, we'll be able to turn on one or multiple vacuum hoppers at the same time. This will allow us to get our junk out of the system and onto conveyors going to our forges. Now, I'm not going to run the power down on the ground, but it is a lot easier to get this set up down here than trying to make a makeshift floor and do it up where I want it to actually be coming in from. So what I'm doing is I'm putting some of these shorter conduit pipes up. They're only markers. Now take out these uprights and we'll actually add in some full length piping, so that way we can start heading it to our control center. We'll take out our markers and we'll put in some more of these uprights. Since we've got 3 separators on the bottom floor, I'll put 3 going down. We've got 3 on the top floor, so I'll put 3 going up. Now let's go ahead and connect each one of our vacuum hoppers individually. Now basically the way this works is we've got 3 lines, we've got 3 vacuum hoppers. So the very closest line to the very first object we want to power, it'll actually end right there. Also, I'm going to put some lights in, so that way in case I power 1, 2, or 3 of these, I can tell which one of these vacuum hoppers are on. And as you can see right there, the second one ends, goes to that second vacuum hopper. The third one goes all the way to the end and to the third vacuum hopper. Now we just need to do the top floor. And basically this is exactly a repeat of what we just did down below. Okay, now I know what you're thinking. Bones, this doesn't look realistic. Everything's just hanging out there, dude. Well, my friends, keep this in mind. This is just a mock-up. I don't plan on keeping this build or the save that's associated with it. So, I don't want to waste your time or my time in making stands or other objects that would make it look more realistic. This is about how these objects work, and this video is about how to wire them and connect them all together. So, from here on out, let's just pretend there are some stands there holding all these objects up. Okay, now that we got our imagination working good, let's get our 6 lines running over to the control center. Now keep this in mind. The control center is one of the last things we'll work on. Therefore, a lot of this may change. Don't worry about it. Just get it here. We'll work on it later. And just like that, we've got most of our factory already wired up. Okay, now let's wire up the other side of our factory. Here we're also going to need 6 individual power sources coming in. So we're just going to do the same tip that we saw a little earlier in the video and get us 6 individual power sources coming in. Now there is a little bit of a difference that I'm doing here. Instead of offsetting our pipes the way we did in the first segment, we're going to actually offset them in a different direction. The reason is because our piping is going to turn in a different direction, and this is the only way to get it to turn that particular direction. Now our first 2 lines are going to go to our forges, but the third line is actually going to go somewhere else. I have barn uprights in, so I'm going to take one out, and I'm actually going to put a vanilla sized upright in. And this will allow us to be underneath those other pipings so we can run in a different direction and they won't collide. Okay, now our first power line will go to the explosives forge that we have in. So we'll make a turn right here, put in a splitter, and connect that to the forge. Now what we're going to want to do is continue that line on around over to this arm that's connected onto our conveyor belts. This arm will direct the flow of junk into that forge, and it needs to be on when the forge is on. If not, junk will just pass right by it. Okay, our second line is running to the second forge. This forge is the ammo forge. And we're just going to do exactly the same thing that we did with the explosives forge. Once I find the right correct pieces that don't, hinder me snapping them on there. So we'll get them connected up. We'll get another splitter on there and then connect the splitter to our forge. Once we've got that connected up, we'll continue running our conduits over to this little arm switch that directs junk into that forge. Once again, when this forge comes on, this arm will open and direct junk into it. Okay, now for our fourth line, which I know we skipped the third one, but it's running in a different direction, and we'll see that here shortly. But our fourth line will be connected to this vacuum hopper, which is jointed to this conveyor storage. When we create any objects or items with our forge, they'll go in there. This vacuum hopper will suck it out, go up this elevator, onto this other conveyor system, which I have connected to it, and that will bring all of our loot to us up at the control center. Okay, now our fifth line will be actually connected to these vacuum hoppers that are jointed with our forges. This is how we'll be able to suck all the unused objects out of the forges and back into our system. Now there are 2 ways you could do this. One is just go ahead and connect both of these vacuum hoppers up to one line. That's the way I'm doing it right now. The other would be to add in an extra line and an extra switch, and then you could turn them off individually if you wanted to. It's all up to you how you want to do it. Now all of our junk items will drop down onto this conveyor, but since it's not connected to our system, we actually need to connect a wire up to it. So that way it comes on the same time that our vacuum hoppers come on. And now all of our junk will be pulled out of the vacuum hoppers and sent to the beginning of our facility to be resorted. And there we go, ladies and gentlemen. We've got most of our system connected already. Now let's go ahead, run a few more of these conduits over towards our control center. And now that I'm putting the curved corners on, you can see that that's why I offset these in the different direction that I did, so that we can make this particular corner and start heading over towards the control center. Now, once again, like I said in the beginning part of the video, don't spend a lot of time getting this over here. There's a high probability it'll change, and it did several times. So I'm just kind of showing here how much time I wasted trying to get this over here when it all ended up changing anyways. So we'll just go ahead and put a couple of these connectors onto the end, and we'll get on to the next part. Okay, since we can't decide where to actually run those conduits, let's go ahead and work on our control center. Now what we've done is put out a makeshift floor that resembles what our control center is going to look like. We've placed a couple of those fence posts down, lined them up on the edges. Now let's grab a conduit, a concrete pillar, where we can do some group selecting and make us kind of a little railing that'll go around that. And those posts will look like it's holding it up. I think we can get some switches on them. So let's continue this little guard or this little railing. We'll group select it and we'll take it over to our little build. Do take a few minutes, line this up the best you can. Now I'm not quite exactly where I would like it to be when I put it down, but you know, like I said earlier in the video, this is just a mock-up. I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting it perfect, and really it's not all that bad. Alright, next we'll need to line up 6 switches so that we can group select them and pull them off. Now we can bring them over to our little railings, line them up the best that you can, and then we can go ahead and release the concrete pillar. Since we have 6 individual lines on one side, 6 individual lines on the other side, I think that, you know, we can set our control center up the same way. And then it should be able to allow us to see our factory operating without much of these objects in the way. And yeah, I like that. That's going to look good. So let's get it over to our control center. Now what I've done is I've placed a barn concrete floor down so I can sink this concrete pillar into it. And once I got it where I think I would like it, just go ahead and release it. And yeah, that is perfect. We're going to be able to see our factory well. Okay, the next thing that we need to do is get a computer terminal out. Now I really feel like a dumbass because I forgot all about this. But, you know, we can actually connect switches to our computer terminal. You can actually connect switches to several of the different tables that are in our inventory as well. Now, because of this, instead of having just 6 switches out, we've got 8. But this is going to be a great way to put our main systems connected to those 2 switches where we can operate them at the computer terminal. And yeah, everything looks good. View is not being blocked at all. Okay, next thing we need to do is get the lines set up for where our power is going to come in. And then we need to connect all of our switches up to that. Now at this point I did have to use the wire glitch for a couple of these switches for whatever reason. They might be into the conduit deal too far or whatever. So keep in mind you may have to use the wire glitch to hook some of this up. Now the next thing that I'm going to want to do is right in the center of our U, add in a light so that we can see when we're coming up the stairs, and another line that runs out towards our terminal, our computer terminal. Now we can hook that up to power as well. The next thing that we'll want to do is use the wire glitch and connect wiring from the terminal to our two side switches. Now that our terminal is powered, so are those two switches. Okay, the next thing I think we need to do is go ahead and start connecting up some of our factory. Since we started with the vacuum hopper that's connected to a container that we had our junk in, that we'll suck our objects out of and send them in to be sorted, I think that's where we need to start, wiring up to as well. So we'll bring this line over here to that particular vacuum hopper and connect it up. Now, since this is the first part of our system to come on, I think it needs to be connected to one of our switches that's on the side of our computer terminal. I did have to use the wire glitch to connect that. Okay, looks good. Now, since we've got our first system wired up to a switch, let's go ahead and connect our control center up to power, and let's see how it's working. And yeah, everything's on great. The lights are on, and all of our objects are working fine because it's all part of that one system. Now, let's see how those lights work. Okay, it's a little bit daylight. Don't see them all that great. But when you turn them on and off, you can see that those sorters are on. And now we don't have to rely on the animations to let us know that it's on. Okay, this part that we're getting ready to see right here can actually be done two different ways. What I'm showing you right now is the way I didn't do it. But it's important to still see this, and the reason is because it's a separate system that needs to be connected to the individual systems. So what this does is when I turn this switch on, or one of these vacuum hoppers, then this particular conveyor belt system comes on. When it deposits items from a vacuum hopper onto it, it's a way that it can take it away and deeper on into our factory. If you connect that all together, then when you turn on one switch, everything would come on and you'd have a hell of a mess. Now, like I said, that's not the way we're going to do it. But because of doing it this way, you can see I just turned on vacuum hopper 4, which is the first one on the floor. It's working, and you can see the conveyor belt up here on top working. It would deposit its items into that conveyor elevator, drop them onto that conveyor line, and take it over to our forges. And it doesn't matter which switch or switches you turned on, they would still all work individually because we wired it to that conveyor belt individually. Now, once again, like I said, this is not the way I did it. The reason is because there's actually more systems that need to be connected to that conveyor belt. So we'll run this conveyor belt off of that system when we wire it. Okay, now let's take a look at how we actually connected this part of the system up. First thing we did was put this junction in so that we could run conduits in a different direction. Then we reconnected it back up to the conveyor belts. What we're going to want to do is run our conduits over and connect up two other individual systems with it, as well as the power. Now, the first system that we're going to want to connect up with it is the conveyor belt system that feeds our forges. Now, if you'll remember back when we first started wiring this side of the factory, we did miss a power inlet. I said it was going to run in a different direction. This is where it went, and these are what are hooked up to it. Now, our third system is this conveyor storage. This is where all of our crafted items from our forges are going to go and be stored. Now, let's go ahead, wire up the part of the system that will bring those items to us. Now, since it is a pretty important part of our system, let's wire it up to the second switch on our computer terminal. Okay, now that we got it on, let's take a look at this part of the system. The vacuum hopper right there will suck crafted items out of the container. They'll go up the elevator. They'll come across this conveyor belt system that we're looking at right there, and they'll make their way all the way up here to the top of the control center where we can retrieve them. We won't have to go down and pick our crafted items up. Now let's go ahead and connect up our forges. Our first forge is the explosives forge. We'll put that on switch 1. The ammo forge we'll put on switch 2. Now when I turned them on, I couldn't tell if they were on or not. None of the animations were working. So I created some electrical fields, put some lights in, and now when I turn on the switch, I can tell that that actually does have power, even though I can't see the animations. Also, we can see the little directional arms are opening and closing as I'm switching the switches on and off. Okay, the next thing we're going to hook up will be our conveyor belt system. And once again, there's two different ways to do it. The first way, you could hook it just directly to a switch. Then you could turn it on and off at your leisure. The second way is to actually connect it to both of your forge switches. This way, when you turn on a forge, your conveyor belt system comes on along with it. In Tanner's Toy Factory, I do have all of my systems separate and individual, wired to their own switch. What happens when I go over there to make things is sometimes I forget to turn certain systems on, and I end up with a hell of a mess somewhere. So I feel that this is a little bit more user-friendly. Yeah, you have a lot less switches to worry about what they were, where they went, especially if you haven't been here for a while. And yeah, we can see everything is working great. All our junk would drop right down there on that conveyor belt system and go right into our ammo forge. When we made some ammo, it'd come out, go into storage, and then we could pull that out and bring it to us when we're ready. Now let's slip over here to the other side that we first worked on and see how this is working. And yeah, I switched on number 1, which would be vacuum hopper on the top floor, number 1. Number 3 is the end one. What I did is I went 1, 2, 3 on the top floor, 4, 5, 6 on the bottom floor. So we'll turn on 6. Yeah, we can see that light's on, and the animations to the belt are actually working too. Okay, seems to be working great. So let's shut it all down, get our next system wired up. We've only got 2 left. Now the one that we're going to wire up next is the system that comes from our forges. This power line runs all the way over to 2 vacuum hoppers. These vacuum hoppers are going to allow us to pull any unused objects out of our forges. What the idea here is to get it back into our system where we can resort it and store it for later use. So what better place to connect this system up but to our first switch that turns on our sorters. So let's go ahead, run up, switch it on, see if it's working. It is a little foggy, and yeah, we're not seeing the animation. So let's run over there, get a little closer where we might get a better look. And yeah, that first sorter's working. Yeah, we can see the belts moving now. But what it'll do is it'll pull these objects out of the forge, place them onto this conveyor, and send it back into our system. And oh no, I just fell down. Somebody help me, help me. I'm gonna get sorted. Alright, enough messing around, Bones. Let's get this last system hooked up, which just happens to be this control arm. Now when we designed our control booth or center, we did add a switch in for that. But now that we're at the end of our build, it seems like another switch will actually work out a little better. What we want to do here is be able to stand in this corner where we can see our conveyor belt system very easily. Now we can sit and switch this switch on and off, opening and closing that arm. The mindset behind this is, let's say our system's starting to get too much junk in it. And we'll use steel for example. We've got way too much steel, we've got to get it out of there. We can stand in that corner and flip that switch and pull any items that are in our system out. It will drop down onto our loot conveyor, which will bring all those objects up to us at the control booth. Just another great example of how to keep your factory fully automated. We don't have to go out into the factory to get items. Okay, now that we're almost done, let's get a little more lighting up here. Once again, this has nothing to do with the operations of our factory. All this is doing is allowing us to see which systems are on or off, just in case our animations aren't working. So keep that in mind. You can run lighting all over your facility. Now, as a quick reminder, this is not the way that I would actually do this if it was a permanent build. This is just one way you could do it. The way I would actually do it is the way that we ran it in Tanner's Toy Factory. So if you're interested in seeing that, jump over there, check that video out. Also, you can see a little bit more about it in the third electrical tips and tricks video, I think it is, the one on conduits. Okay, we've got junk in the trunk. We've turned our system on. Let's see how it works here a little bit. Now, this is an electrical tips and tricks video on these manufacturing objects. So, we're not going to spend a lot of time here checking out how this is going to work or how this factory is working. But we can see objects getting sorted and going into storage. We'll take a look at the middle conveyor. This is where objects not accepted on the top row drop down to the bottom sorters. Now, this is the part of the system I mentioned a bit earlier, our overflow system. So as objects are not being accepted in our sorters, they are being passed into this part of the system. Once again, it's connected to our loot system. So once we turn on our loot system switch, all those items would come out and to us. Okay, we've got everything sorted and stored. Let's go ahead and make something real quick. Once again, we'll just use the ammo forge and make some 45s. So let's turn on the ammo forge. It's on. All the conveyors are working. The little arm is closed, so junk will be directed that way. Now all we have to do is choose the storage units that has the items in it that we need. It happens to be number 1 and number 2. Now, just in case you're interested, in the description on this video, I'll list each and every component that's in our sorters and which sorters they're in. After building Tanner's Toy Factory, it didn't take us long to discover what objects we needed in what sorters to actually build almost everything that all of the forges can make. So that should be very helpful to you guys. Okay, now that we've made some ammo, it's time to bring all of our junk back into our system to be resorted. So I've turned on our main switch once again, and you can see all the items are going back in to be sorted and stored. Alright, now let's take a look at our little switch we just put in. I did almost forget to turn on our loot conveyor switch. And now we can sit here and operate this back and forth, pulling objects out of our system. Also, since we turned on our loot conveyor system, here comes our ammo. Also, remember, our overflow is connected to this system as well. All the objects our sorters didn't accept are now here up in this container. This is just a great example of how we were able to design our factory to be 100% fully automated. Now, I'm really curious to find out if this is something that you've tried to do before. Do you have, or have you tried to make a factory that's fully automated? If so, what problems did you run into? What systems did you guys create and make that helped cater towards the way you play Fallout 4? I'm very interested to find out. Also, just in case you're interested in more about this build, please go check out the other 2 videos on this series. We've got a lot of tips and a lot of tricks on how to manipulate these machinery objects. Alright everybody, I think that's it for today's video. Thank you for coming and hanging out with me today. I do greatly appreciate you coming and spending your precious time with me. And just like always, until next time, please stay safe and peace.